So hello everyone and welcome to this live Q&A session for our Marketing Analytics Masterclass. It's so nice to have you here today. This is our first live Q&A session, so I'm very excited about it. I'm Parag and I work as a product marketing manager at Hebo. I'll be your today's host and moderator for this session. So today I am joined by our esteemed panelist, Brandee Sanders. She's a VP of marketing at Modal. Welcome, Brandee. Then we have Stanton, who is a founder and CEO of CMOx. Welcome, Cassie. And then we have Phil Irvine, who is a VP of Audience Intelligence at RPA. Welcome all, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so before we start the session, I'm gonna brief you about how we are going to run our today's session. So all attendees will be on listen only mode. So we are going to record this session and we'll be emailing you the recording link post the session. So we will take the questions that were submitted to us in advance, and post that we will take the live questions one by one. So for live questions, you can type in your questions in the Q&A window available on your screen. Please don't post lengthy questions, be very precise. And while submitting your questions, please mention your name, question, and name of the speaker who should answer this question. And I'm going to read out questions one by one, and then we'll direct it towards one of our panelists here for their answers. Also, apart from the questions, if you want to share your feedback about this masterclass, then please share your comments in the chat window available on your screen. It will really help us get motivated and help us create more valuable content in the future. Okay, so let's get started with the questions then. So the first question is from Gerald. Let me read it out. All right. So in an early stage startup, when is the right time to transition on the insight-driven organization maturity scale from phase 3, which is analytics aspirations, to phase 4, which is analytical companies? Given that resources are scarce and data analytics often isn't a top priority. I think, Brandee, this is for you.
Oh, what a fun question. Wow. Speedball right at the start. So I hate these two words because they just make me really angry, and it triggers a lot of emotions, but it depends, right? And it does depend. So if you have analytically literate leadership that actually make data-driven, like the actual data-driven decisions, not just like they love the words data-driven and then everything is gut check and opinion, which is wildly a part of Series A and Series B. So everybody buckle up for that. If you think startups are not in gut check land, you got another thing coming. But I would say if you have leadership that truly believes in that and knows that change management with any kind of analytical buy-in into business decisions is an org-wide decision. So an individual contributor like an IC can't do it. Even a VP, like if I just walked in the door tomorrow and said, hey, everybody, we're going to do reporting like this, I'm sure my COO would have some choice words to say about it, right? So get ready, 6 to 12 months at minimum for that. It does not happen overnight. Anyone who tells you that is not to be trusted or potentially not sober. So I would say, start with small things like a pilot. I think if you're trying to get to a maturity level where we're really getting everyone to look at analytics, not just retrospectively, like how did XYZ do, but in planning sessions, like what will XYZ accomplish, and then using that to plan or budget or discuss, like even at a campaign level, what's going to happen next. I think that can start with your team as an example, and then a successful pilot with metrics that are provable, right? So like one of the things we talked about in the masterclass was pilot to pipeline. So not everybody is going to be into that. And when you have traditional chasms like sales to marketing, which is pretty prevalent in Series A to Series B, pre-IPO and even post-IPO. So anybody who's over there thinking it goes away with big orgs, again, have I got news for you? You would need to launch a pilot, right? And so that's why I would say start small, start with something that can be easily provable, that you have data that indicates it could be a buy-in, and get your team successful at it. I always say rules of three, because 3 is 2 and 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you do it once, it'll be likely, oh, hey, what an amazing accident you had there. If you can do it 2 or 3 times, even if it's something as simple as like emails or social media timing posts, anything like that, using data to make those decisions and then having that plated up so that anyone, even people who are nearly data illiterate, can understand we started here. This is why we did this. We ended up here. Yada. I think that's the thing. And again, this varies, per organization and per role. If you're in a DS role, it's going to be a wildly different pilot than it would be for, say, like marketing or something like that, or even sales. So I think, again, it depends. Makes me really mad to have to say that, because I love explicit, like quantifiable, statistical, precise answers. But your org, when you walk in the room, who's going to buy into the idea of like change is coming, and change is very hard, but change is also necessary for growth. So not a lot of folks like change. So you better have, that nice bucket of provable pilots in your castle before you come in and try to ask them to move at a larger scale, because it's quite rare, as we talked about in the masterclass, for those organizations, even enormous legacy operations that are billions and billions of dollars, massive global companies, still struggle to adopt that, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah. So here is the next question from Kristen. So what parameters can I use to classify my customers into value-based tiers from the history of engagement with the organization other than the revenue generated? So I think this is for Casey.
Yeah, great. So the question was, what parameters can I classify? What was the rest? Something into value-based deals outside of revenue generator?
Repeat the question. So what parameters can I use to classify my customers into value-based tiers from the history of engagement with the organization other than revenue generated?
Yeah, great. So one thing that comes up to me here is to classify your customers along the way in marketing. So what we discussed in the presentation that I did, which was around maximizing ROI on paid channels, is that what we need to have is we need to be able to attribute folks accurately and understand where they came from, and to attribute them with different variables, such as their interaction on emails, their interaction on the website, if they've attended webinars and things like that. Can you do any kind of lead scoring for these people? I find that is an interesting and obviously effective way to qualify folks and to bucket them into different subsets of potential to move on different deals based on their what they've been doing. One great tool that I've used and folks on my team have used is Wicked Reports, and being able to pull in the interaction data across multiple different platforms. So for example, your email platform, your website, any videos that you have hosted anywhere else, deals that happen offline. If you have a outbound phone team, being able to track all of that, and whatever tool that is, any outbound phone calls that happen with like a predictive dialer, all of that can be dumped into a tool like Wicked Reports. There's another one that's maybe a little more, I don't know, kind of hip these days, which is Hyros. So those are great tools, and to be able to pull some of the native reports that they have to understand more of the engagement that a prospect or a customer has had. And I think in doing that, you can see who's qualified. And this goes back to that book, which is Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz, where he talks about people being unaware that they have a problem, or aware that they have a problem, aware that there's a solution, aware that there's a product for the solution, and then the most aware, which is they know they have a problem, they know that there's a solution, they know of your solution, and they just haven't bought from you yet. And if you're looking for something outside of just that revenue number, you want to look at those people who are aware that they have a problem and aware that you have a premium solution or the right solution for them for whatever their problem is. And you want to identify that, that little slice of folks, and then be able to go tackle them with, clear, coherent marketing campaigns.
Absolutely. So now this is more, concerned with the personalization approach. So I'll take the next question on the personalization. So it is asked by Barry. The question is, would you run personalized ads based on pre-conceptualized customer demographic, or go broad to identify your customer demographic and then introduce personalization?
Is that a question for me as well?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, great question. So, the answer is they're both good premises and you should test them. And it's not clear what would be the winner out of the gate, though. Signal, if anyone here is tracking what Signal's doing, the private messaging app, Signal just ran some really interesting ads that are highly personal to the audience. And they did that, I think, to kind of flex what Facebook and Instagram in that situation tracks for individuals. So the ad said something along the lines of, you're the kind of person that's in a same-sex relationship who believe Black Lives Matter and voted for Bernie Sanders, and here's an ad just for you. That's what the ad said. Obviously that direction is not a helpful direction to do anything but to scare folks into not wanting to be on Facebook and to value their privacy. So that's like the polar end of how to use an overly personalized ad in a way that can capture people's attention. I certainly think if you can do what I think Robert Collier said in marketing, which is to join the conversation in the prospect's head, that's the best way to do it. It's not to say, hey, I know all these things about you. It's to start up a conversation based on you knowing those things about the person. So I would say understand the psychographics, the demographics of the individual. And then there's a great marketer named Craig Clemens, and he says to start with curiosity. Curiosity draws people in. So ask a yes question. Have you ever thought about blank? Well, then, and then you can go through in your ad copy. Those kind of conversation starters, joining the conversation in their head, not coming in out of left field with something, radically new and different. It reminds me of when you describe a company, you could say, well, we have a decentralized lawn care team that is in every city through this application, and you can hire lawn care, yada, yada. Or we can say, oh, it's like the Uber for lawn care, right? We want to say things to people that is simple for them to understand and joins the conversation in their mind. So my advice for you is to identify the personal components that that makes the buyer, and then walk around what their problem is, see it from different angles, say it in different ways, and see if you can capture their attention to get the click and then drive it from there. But I think you would be foolish to be too on the nose with the data that you know of the person.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll piggyback and totally agree with everything that Casey said. And to give you another example, we work with a big auto client, and they have a huge focus on building out or trying to grow multicultural audiences, and especially with Hispanics. There was a hypothesis that if we had signals of somebody of Hispanic origins, that we should translate ads, regardless of format, display, email, social, into the native language of the audience. And through research, what we found is those didn't necessarily perform well. It was more, what resonated more was culturally relevant imagery versus, trying to speak directly in their language to try to get them to, go to the website, visit a dealer and buy a car. So I think to that point, there's so much chatter around, be as personalized one-to-one with communications as possible. But it definitely is a balance where you want to toe the line of being, relevant enough, but not being creepy to some extent to kind of turn your customers off with, what product you're trying to push and advertise. So that's just one anecdote that I thought was interesting where, even if you have the greatest of data, about a cohort or individuals, it may not necessarily be the most effective to try to get, laser pinpointed with how you target them with messaging and creative and whatnot. So.
Absolutely. So Brandee, you want to add anything to this point?
So I'm going to agree with that because there's permissive based marketing, right? And then it gets to the point where you're like, I'm getting like 5 VPNs and I'm going so deep down this Tor rabbit hole that no one will ever be able to identify me. And so just so I don't get personalized ad that make radical assumptions based on like stereotypical associations or affiliations that an algorithm that's incredibly biased and skewed is making based off of generalized like affiliated groups, right? So I think, there's a fine line between, wow, that is just absolutely creeping me out, and I'm going to close this browser and never come back again, to, oh, they understand the Brooklyn person who bought the $10 artisanal mayo may like kombucha. Sure, that's an affiliate group. So I think that kind of stuff, there's intelligence in that, and then there's also the fact that it's almost like the Pandora conundrum, right? So like Pandora versus Spotify, like if you look at streaming music, Spotify will continue to generate what you already listen to. Pandora will make suggestions like the Sirius XM tie, like they'll make suggestions based off of similar but also divergent. And I think that kind of extra branch on the tree is interesting because if you look at your buyers, you might have people who don't even know what you have is what they want. Instead of looking at the obvious signal, you have the anomalies. And sometimes your anomalies can turn out to be a fabulous niche market that you might not even recognize. So it's like it's a fine line.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So here is the next one from Prakash. So how to set channel-wise targets without any data at hand? Phil, maybe you want to take this one?
Oh, wow. Another 100-mile-per-hour fastball being thrown out there. So just so I understand, you're asking how to set channel targets as in like KPIs,
yes,
without any data at hand. I think, so I'll give the answer in a couple of different ways. When you're just starting out and trying to figure out how to distribute budgets across channels, I mean, I think the logical step first is to try to think of how you can scale your lowest cost channels initially. So, email is the lowest cost channel, and then thinking of mechanisms of how you can collect as much first party data as possible, whether it's, introducing sign-up modals on your site, on your organic social channels, thinking of ways where you can maybe partner with logical other entities where it's logical fits to maybe do co-branded type partnerships to try to acquire lists, and then scaling the email channel. The other thing I've found through past experience is, when you're in a role, so I've held various roles, direct to consumer marketing roles, like running CRM or growth marketing. Vendors are chomping at the bit to try to talk with you to get your business. And a lot of times you can actually just lean into them and ask them about case studies or how other similar types of companies have approached distributing budgets across channels as well, to just get multiple data points about how to figure out how to distribute your budgets kind of out the gate. But I think, ultimately, to tie back to what Casey was mentioning, ultimately you got to set up experiments and tests to really see what's going to be the best for your specific business model, to be able to understand what your true marketing mix should be. And then ultimately, as at later stages, as you mature, you can try to look into media mix models, multi-touch attribution type models to really scientifically understand the best distribution of media spend by channel and whatnot. But yeah, it's probably not the greatest answer when you have no data, but I think leaning into resources that you may have, trying to pick the brains of vendors or maybe other peers to see what's worked, what hasn't in the past, I think. But ultimately, it is thinking thoroughly through setting up experiments and testing out those experiments, but then in advance also thinking through what your next step is or your next move is if an experiment works or doesn't work, and then what the follow-up next steps and next experiments are on top of that to set up a mode where you're constantly learning and constantly adapting, how you distribute and put in market different types of ads and media with various channels.
I've got something to add if you don't mind. I think that's a great point. And Phil, I think you're spot on there around salespeople and vendors. They are in a position to know more than most. And there's a couple things here. So the first one that comes to mind is the book 48 Laws of Power. And law number 13 says, get help by appealing to someone's self-interest, never to their mercy. So never say to them, can you please help me? Say, hey man, we'll sign up with you if you can help me. Right? Like appeal to their self-interest, show the salesperson that they're the expert and that you're asking them, and just kind of like honor their experience. And I find that they're a lot more open to share information. Second to that, I'm always pleasantly surprised how far $200 can go. Hey, can I get an hour with you anytime that you're free I'll give you a $200 Amex card. I just have a couple questions to ask you about the market. And you can take people that are in these roles that are maybe, a mid-level salesperson that has a ton of experience, that's locked in, and they just want to feel good. They just want to feel important. So if you go find that person, you go wave $100 or $200 at them, you book them for a half hour or an hour, and you have your questions and you just run through them, you're going to get more insight from what's actually working. Asking someone who's like working with check writers, working with people that are actually spending the money or doing the experiment and getting the outcomes. They just have a phenomenal amount of information, and they probably lead a pretty quiet life. So you coming in and asking for this just probably could make their day, and then the money just makes it like a hell yes really quickly.
Call them a thought leader.
Yeah, call them a thought leader. Call them whatever you want to call them, right?
For the podcast.
If you make them feel smart and special, they'll be willing to share tons of information with you. Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. Sometimes they are smart and special, and that's why they're in the role, right? That's why they have the title. Not all of the books have the same chapter, but definitely some of them. I would say too, look for the people in your direct line of sight. That could be on LinkedIn. That could be a podcast that you listen to. And to your point, Casey, I think that gift card offer does go pretty far. But those little featurettes, those tiny head nods, and I hesitate to call it ego stroke, because half of the time, again, what you learn in a 20-minute verbal brain dump is worth like 10 years and a PhD at Stanford, right? So you're just like, oh, that's relevant. That's happening right now, not like 20 years ago when, we didn't know what a filter view was in Google. So I think that looking in your direct line of sight and then tapping into referrals. So I feel like if you've done someone a solid, shared their posts, amplified their voice, given them assistance with something, been a voice in need, don't hesitate or be afraid to go back to that person and say, hey, here's something that I'm doing. Do you know anyone who would be able to chat with me about this really quickly? And a lot of the times, as long as you do solid by other people, you're still pumping that good karma, you'll get folks who are willing to reach across the aisle, right? Even with those small incentives, I think it's pretty big.
Absolutely. Cool. So here is the next one from Matthew. What would be an ideal approach to transition from a legacy stack to a modern data stack without disturbing daily operations? Brandee, this is for you.
Let me tell you why I find that funny first up.
There are no softballs in this question set for sure.
I gotta tell you, let me paint a picture for you. All right. So what you're talking about is you have a 90 1987 Omni, and your final goal is to win the Daytona 500. Tell me how you will reformat that car, kick the engine, redo the body, change all of the, literally everything in it, retrofit it to win the Daytona 500 without disturbing it. It's impossible. Disturbance is a part of change, right? The best way to approach that is like, hey, everybody, we're not going to say this is easy. It's very difficult. This is why, 9 out of 10 startups fail. And it's why you need people at the organizational level. If you're dead ass about like going forward with data, you got to have someone helping you. Like it's not a one-man army. Oh God, that I wish it were, because I think my career trajectory would have been wildly different. But you have to have buy-in. And that's why when we talk about like disturbance, you can minimize disturbance by doing it in tiers or waves. But once you get near a big beastie, like say the CRM, and you're talking about accounts and parent-child dynamics and objects and fields and validation pick lists and how you look at the organization, like how the CEO looks at the organization for a growth mindset may be radically different from his very own SVP of sales. How they view their account base, how they want it to look, how the CMO or the VP of marketing wants to see the CRM or reporting or what's important to them. Each of them have their own unique perspective. And sometimes, believe it or not, folks, the CEO, C-suite, or your VPs, or your managers, your directors, they are all on magical different islands of reality. And so their perspectives are uniquely siloed and skewed, which is why we talk about silos, because you have to walk into the room before you talk about changing legacy and go, reality check, who's down with this and who thinks it's a BS data thing that's going to like fail in 3 months and we're going to churn like 75%, right? So like that open, transparent, actually very visible conversation starts at the top, because the fish rots from the head if you don't have buy-in, and just goes down the ladder. So it has to start at the top. Now you at the bottom, or wherever you may be, can try those little small pilots, right? The things that are like, hey, it seemed like this was important and it might be useful. But the majority of the time, organizational buy-in starts at the top and finds its way down. I've been in a lot of orgs, particularly very large legacy orgs, and companies that have been around for like nigh upon 100 years and were amazing companies from the outside. And then you got in and you lifted the hood and realized that their CRM is like somewhere between 1985 and like Stranger Things. And you're like, wow, I'm not sure. Is this whole company held up with Excel spreadsheets? And like one guy in Boise who did an API call for us one year. So I think it's, again, it is impossible to do it without disruption. Now, again, you can minimize this disruption by having extraordinarily open conversations about who's bought in and what their goals are, documenting the living hell out of it. Document, because like 6 months later, your CEO and your VP are going to change their mind about what they need once they start seeing changes in the CRM, and you need to make sure you have receipts to prove that what you said was already what was proven to be true, and that's what they asked for. So getting them on the same page is absolutely critical. But again, disruption is impossible if you are taking, that steam engine and trying to make like, the Disneyland monorail. It will be necessary for change, but making sure people understand the change will be a positive impact for all, and that the growth spurts that are painful are just a traditional part of particularly startups. They're a part of it. So if you want to grow and play with the big boys, you have to be willing to put the work in. And those timelines stand 6 to 12 months at minimum. Someone telling you 90 days or I need a new CRM in 30 days, you need to exit that conversation rapidly. That's just my absolutely upfront, honest feedback after many years of success and failure.
Yes, definitely. So one more question on the similar lines to a modern data stack. So there are multiple definitions of a modern data stack. So many companies, even they are using old age technologies, tools, still they call themselves as, they are using a modern tools or techniques. So I want to understand, like from your perspective, what defines a modern data stack?
All right, I'll go. I'll go first.
I want to know.
I think charmingly enough, after all that future state talk, it's the one that works for the company that lets them operate at their best and can be scaled. So if you are in XYZ industry or vertical and you have a legacy system, but your leadership and your company is going to be growing, COVID is a great example of this because it impacted companies that had to grow, 200x in like 90 days to accommodate new asks. If it can't take the spikes, or if anyone's in dev, like the load testing, if it can't withstand a load test 200% this way, 200% that way, and it's going to break, then that's not modern enough for you. So you have to have something that's going to scale up and scale down with the org, and then think about 5 years from now, are we going to have to rip this bad boy out and start all over again? Because I guarantee you, when the change management comes around on that, you're going to lose all your tribal knowledge from those groups that were part of the 1.0 group. It's going to be like, oh, we've always done it this way, we don't want to change it again, right? So putting the work in at the front with something that can grow with the company. And I'm not saying woohoo, straight to Salesforce or straight to HubSpot, but like something that will fit the company. If all of a sudden you woke up tomorrow and your product took off like a shot to the moon and you had 300x the orders, what would you do? Would it fall apart and die, or would it be able to grow with it? That's the modern tech stack, right? It has to be able to respond with agility. And if your legacy stack can do that, then God bless you, that's amazing. But if not, if there are pieces there that are going to break, when you load test that bad boy, you have to be prepared for it because it's critical for your business to stay alive. And 2020 is like, retrospectively, a great hard lesson for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. So scalability
Yeah.
is the most important aspect here. Phil, yes.
Yeah, I was good. I mean, I couldn't have said that any better. I guess what I was just gonna chime in, because a big thing in my world, for those that didn't see my presentation, I work more in the advertising, new customer acquisition space in my current world. And so data privacy is a huge just topic of conversation. For those that don't know, third-party cookies are going away in the near future. So we're trying, a big focus of where we play with, or where we support our clients, is in new customer acquisition and trying to reach as much scale as efficiently as possible. And so I guess just the other thing I would add to, what the modern tech stack should look like, it's also business model dependent. For the auto client that I mentioned, they're constantly trying to figure out like new and innovative ways to reach, new prospects, whether we have signals that they're coming off lease with current vehicles that they own, or they've been owners for 15 plus years. And thinking about, I guess my biggest point is connecting technology that can help you meet the business objectives that you need to drive your business forward, versus, we have other clients where we have an energy company that we work with, and, in most locales, there's one option for, energy services. So who your customer base is, but you're trying to increase net promoter scores, satisfaction rates. You're trying to get people to participate in programs. So when you're marketing to an existing customer base, there's specific technologies geared around that, and cross-selling and using first-party data signals more so than trying to reach like new prospects and customers to drive growth on that perspective. So that's just the other thing that I would add for, those on the line that are thinking about like, what is the modern tech stack? It's also dependent upon the business driver, the business drivers that are going to move the company forward, depending upon your business situation. So.
Absolutely. Casey, you want to add anything further to this?
No, I'll let them take that. They're the experts here on that.
Perfect.
Just don't launch on a Friday. How about that one? It's a good piece of advice. Don't launch on a Friday.
All right. So here is the next one from Jamie. So we are a startup and don't have a large data team. So for data pipelining, should I develop an in-house solution or go for a third-party tool? What's your take on using all-in-one tool versus specialized tools? Maybe Cassie, you can.
Yeah, ask the first part of the question again.
So it's about build versus buy. So I'll just read the question again. So we are a startup and don't have a large data team. So for data pipelining, should I develop an in-house solution or go for a third-party tool?
Yeah. Great question. All right. So, solve a problem as a startup, right? Like if you're a startup, you're in this mode of identifying a problem in the market and positioning yourself to actually solve it. If you can solve that problem quickly, then you can get the funding that you need, or you can get the customers that you need, and you can get them to pay and maybe prepay in order for you to hire the team to build out what you need. Unless what you're doing is incredibly proprietary and you need something that isn't available off the shelf, I think like a no-code approach, as much as possible, is where you should start. As you know, entrepreneurs, we get married to our ideas. We get married to what we think the solution is. So we spend time building out a solution instead of being courageous and going and selling and having the market tell us that we're wrong, right? And that we need to change fundamentally what we have. And if you've built a perfect solution to the wrong problem, you have to unbuild it. I think, I mean, even with all things marketing, you know, people say, oh, I can't start the business until I have a logo first. It's just like, no, like that's certainly not what you need. You need a problem. I think of Gary Halbert. He says, you know, what's the one advantage that you could have to ensure that you're successful? What's the one advantage? And he asked a room of copywriters. And at the end, he says, I just want a starving crowd. That's all I want. I want people who are starving. If I have a starving crowd, then I'm solid. I can always find something to feed them. So identify the problem that you're solving, build a solution. An MVP solution is fine. You can put it behind a glitzy single page website if you need to, but create a torrent of demand and then satisfy that demand with a better, more scalable tool. I think it's Paul Graham who said, do things that don't scale. Right? Like don't lead out and say, I'm going to build the world's greatest X. Say, I'm going to go solve this problem. And if that means I have to build this world's greatest X, then I'll do that when the time comes, when I have the capital. But there's nothing quite like investing customers' money into improving their experience. That's a much better place to be than investing your money or your friends and family money or some, you know, VC capital that you got to get started. So just solve a damn problem and don't get married to your solution.
And I think and I think there might be like a secondary subtext to that question with small data teams and pipeline, because I'm always thinking about it from like, are they talking about reporting? Are they talking about collating information together?
Preparation.
Yeah. So warning, custom dev costs money. I'm talking a 3 to 4 person team making 6 figures, even in a non-competitive or offshore market. You're still going to be paying for the talent. And if you are talking about building a custom solution internally to solve a data problem, I would say look externally first, because there's a ton of subscription based or at will solutions that will let you test the effectiveness of the solution and how it wrangles your data and what you want it to do, versus if you try to do a custom internal data project. And I think we actually went over this in the slide deck. It was like prepare for spend, which is like literally the death knell for anyone on the external or leadership team, because the minute you say, well, technically the timeline for that, again, will be between 6 and 12 months for a really sophisticated tool. Like if you're trying to like wrangle your Salesforce data and do like some kind of elegant pipeline solution, right? It's like that data lake type stuff. You're going to be investing a lot, and then wake up tomorrow and realize, like if the market shifts, to Casey's point, that it's no longer of value. So you just spent what, 1.2 million on a data lake solution that now no longer works because the API permissions changed and the entire team left and that head engineer now left. And then you have people who don't know what's going on and it's all custom code and it's totally blocked. That happens.
Absolutely. I think it's a very common question. So it's not only faced by the startup, but also mid-size or large enterprises face the same problem day in, day out. Cool. Now, okay, just as a reminder for everyone, for all the attendees. So if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A window And if you have any feedback about the masterclass, just put them in the chat window. Um, just a reminder. All right, so we will move on to the next set of questions. So here is the next one from Josh. So how to choose between deploying a third-party CDP like Segment or some other platforms, or use standard data visualization platform on top of an in-house single source of truth?
What is, yeah, I was going to say, what is the report answering? What does it solve for the business? Because that's the dependency. So you can have all of the most badass Tableau vizzes, but it doesn't matter if it's not actionable or being adopted or ingested or formulating business decisions for the org. And I know everyone gets addicted to sexy visualizations. I'm totally guilty of that. There's like a pie chart on in the bathroom door at my house, right? So like percentage of time I'm in here, 85%. But I think that there's a bit of a danger in constantly like reaching for that bar, because you may or may not realize this depending upon the organization and the culture you have there, but not everyone is into that. Some people still really love CSVs and exporting straight from Salesforce and then putting it into an XLS and running pivot tables, and they adore VLOOKUP. So I think that the precursor to that question, in the same way that I would say, they're like, what flower is this? And I'd be like, what seed did you plant? Like, what are you trying to grow here, man? Is what is the objective of the implementation? Because that's going to direct the answer.
Got it. All right. So here is the next one from Selena. So what are your favorite ad management and performance reporting tools? Which one do you suggest to be used by a high growth SME? So I think Cassie and Phil, you both can answer. You both have.
Yeah, sure. So I think Wicked Reports is a top contender for me. I think it's a very effective approach, especially when you have offline events like sales teams. Hyros is another one, hyros.com. Yeah, those are two that I like. Phil, what about you?
Yeah, my world's a little different. I mentioned multi-touch attribution, a really popular vendor that I'm seeing being utilized with a lot of my clients is Data Plus Math. It's a multi-touch attribution vendor where basically for campaigns you're running, you can set up test and holdout groups. And then they have a lot of really slick dashboards where you can look at incremental lifts by various channels that you're running media against to see, which channels are overperforming versus others, where are you seeing reach and scale across your channels. And you can make some really interesting decisions and from a budgeting perspective. And then also you can also dive into creative performance within each of the channels as well. And the benefit there again is that it's showing you incrementality versus just, kind of from a straightforward perspective, looking at performance against all of your channels. So Data Plus Math is a big one that we're seeing that's growing in popularity with our clients right now.
Got it. Brandee, any other tools that you use?
I usually it depends on the industry. For current, I would just say we use the internal native tracking applications in the ad platform that we're running on for simplicity's sake and immediacy. But in other industries that I've worked in, particularly, we would always be pumping those through like Tableau or through some other kind of tool, like on the ABM side, like demand base, stuff like that. We would be tying all of that back together, right?
Got it.
On the size of the org, the industry that they're in at, because some of those industries really don't need super sexy, like shiny object stuff. They just need, what is it? Is it working? And I know just from personal experience, and it's a biased personal experience with some of the C-suite I've worked with, most of the time they don't give a rat's what it looks like. They just want to know, what did it pump? Like, how did it affect pipeline? And what percentage of those went to call, went to demo, went to closed won? And most of that can be exported from your single choice of truth, which would be your CRM. And that for me is traditionally Salesforce.
And a scorecard, I think, to that point, right? Like a simple scorecard, executive level scorecard, where the executives understand the impact, but they don't need to know impressions or CPM or click-through rate or leads to impression or whatever, right?
They get distracted by that. And
Right.
sometimes the last thing you want to do is put an onion in front of them in the middle of a meeting and have them start to try to unwrap it, because people who know just enough to be dangerous, which is just such a common headache, can misinterpret data and skew it in a fashion that doesn't follow the logic of how you're operating. And that could be based on their personal history as well. So being as explicit and as bare bones as possible is usually the best operating mechanism, at least based off like my personal experience. Less is more, and let them ask you for it before you give it, because you send them a Google Studio Data Studio report, they're going to be like, oh my God, what is this? Month over month traffic is down. And then you're just like, well, let me explain to you what that really means. Let's look at the year-over-year perspective for a little relativity. And then you have to zoom out, and then that's like a 25-minute Zoom call. You'll never get those minutes back in your life. So bare bones is better. And as you get into larger legacy or enterprise level orgs out of SMB and mid-market, that's when you can have the really lovely stuff.
Got it. So in addition to this build versus buy classic problem, so there is one more thing. That there is another question that comes to mind is whether to go with all-in-one tool or whether to choose a specialized tools. So because there are multiple platforms available in the market who are used for data preparation, data storage, then reporting, analytics, everything can be done just on one platform. So whether to go with that tool or whether to choose specialized tools for each of these operations.
My immediate go ahead, Brandee, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say whatever serves the org best, because it's like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Guess what? Every CEO will have a different answer, my friends. So like the answer will be dependent upon the appetite for change at your organization and how much I just want to stay in one place versus I'm going to put the shoe, not the shoe on that's in the room. I'm going to go work to find the shoe that actually fits my foot. Right. So I think it's whatever works best for the organization you're at. And I realize that's fairly nebulous, but you try on a couple shoes, you can certainly figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, the case for kind of the all-in-one tool, becoming like a Salesforce or Adobe or Oracle shop is, the case for that is the cost savings, as the more suites you buy within their portfolio, the case is that there's cost savings, the more that a company invests across suites. And then, allegedly too, there's also synergies and maybe a little bit easier speed with connecting all of the data across different platforms. Say you have a CRM, a marketing automation piece, maybe a DMP, the case there too is that there might be synergies there. But, having said that, I've worked with a lot of clients that, were complete Salesforce shops, but then they divested, pieces over time because certain functions just didn't perform as well as specialized, alternative software. So I hate to say, this is another answer where it depends, but there's cases to be made kind of both ways there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cassie, you wanted to
add? I think that sometimes the best isn't on paper the best. Kind of to Brandee's point, Salesforce I love, but I've also worked with a lot of people who absolutely hate it. And if Salesforce is the right answer, but no one will adopt it, then it's the wrong answer. So there's some softer pieces to it. So it's identify the ones that, the team that satisfies the business logic and what you need and the functionality that you need. And then you potentially have to choose a less than ideal solution because it'll get adoption.
Yeah. And that can be done by an anonymous poll. So don't even think about it too hard. Like if you have the permission base to queue and query, do the query, because sometimes the C-suite assumption of knowing the organization will reveal itself in an anonymous poll.
Sure. So here's the next one from Anu. A single source of truth is very important, but at times it is not possible to stick to the best source of truth, because the definition of best can vary based on the context. What is your consideration for such situations which lead to multiple sources of truth?
I'm just warning you, if you leave multiple sources of truth on the table, I promise you with all of the bones in my body that sales will pick a different one than marketing, and your C-suite will have an entirely different perspective than your VPs, than your directors. It's just a dangerous road. So does that mean that you necessarily can't have different data sets that you're making business decisions off of that better suit that leg of the organization? Totally not. Like you can have those different things, but they must be visible in a way that you understand the connection and the weight of the value in each of those things. So if you have your PPC team measuring, effectiveness in the native ad roll or Google AdWords area, and then you have your social media team over here in HubSpot, but they're also getting feeds in regarding ads, or like you've got this other tool that was like left over by the person who exited the org because blah, blah, blah. Like it can turn into a cacophony. And again, the warning is sometimes more data is dangerous than minimizing. And when you have multiple sources of truth, the organization has no head, or worse yet, it's a multi-headed hydra. And then every day as a person working in data, you have to get up, get a giant sword and chop off the other three heads and say, shut up, don't listen to that. That's not syncing correctly. It's not mapping correctly into the CRM here. Let me take you over here. Now you have to export it into a CSV or an XLS. Then you have to run a VLOOKUP and a pivot. And it's Saturday at 9 p.m. and you're trying to figure out this board deck. So like this, the simplest warning is be warned, if you leave multiple sources of truth open, your instruction booklet has the Robert Frost 2 paths in the yellow wood. And I guarantee you, even your C-suite, your one COO, your CO are going to choose different paths based off personal bias and perspective and levels of comfort with technology. So like, that's my warning. Does it happen? Absolutely. And usually there's a marketing ops person or a data operations specialist that's there stitching stuff together manually with like 55 Excel tabs open and LinkedIn Premium open at the same time, because they're just going to lose it. So I think that you want to be mindful that there needs to be a centralized point of truth. Like at the end of the month, if you can't figure out what your true rev is because HubSpot says this and Salesforce says this, and then also Pipefy says this, you're going to have a problem. And guess who's going to get slammed for that? Certainly not the other people. It's going to be whoever the master is for that bit of the CRM or your database.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So here is the next one from Kenneth. Is there any way to attribute purchases or any marketing goals to non-digital channels like print or TV? Phil?
Yeah. So, the most straightforward answer to that is via your CRM. And if you have the ability to port in offline transactions into a centralized CRM database, there's, for TV specifically, there's vendors like Ampersand, and iSpot is another one that we're working with right now with a travel client, and they have the ability to put certain type of tracking and pixels on their ads so that you can see where ads were exposed to either individuals at an addressable level or potentially from a regional or zip +4 level. And then you can figure out, how many, it depending upon the KPIs you're tracking, if you want to track just website visits or ultimate sales, you can make that connection between who was exposed to the ads and then how that influenced, whatever KPI. I think you mentioned sales. So if you have, the big dependency there is if you can have your offline orders, ported into that centralized CRM system to be able to do that. But if he's looking for possible vendors to partner with, iSpot and Ampersand are two that we work with heavily right now for that.
All right. Here's the next one from Tara. This one is on LTV. One issue we are facing is better understanding the average lifespan of customers. For most companies, data is limited to a few years, which could lead to a bias if we take all customers, because some customers are still live, and if we take all lapsed customers, because we are excluding our loyal live customers. So what is your preferred approach for real life LTV estimates for companies with long term customer relationship but limited time horizon data? कैसे?
My first question is, why does it matter? Are you asking that question because you're going to make a like marketing decision based on it? Do you really need to go that upside down for that long, for that lifetime value to come back and turn a profit? The point of a business, like Peter Drucker says, is to get and keep a customer. Your job is to always expand the lifetime value of the customer. It's a never-ending job. So I think what we, when I advise companies, what I advise them to do is define a lifetime value of a customer to the best that we can, to the best of our abilities. We want to get a 12-month, we want to get a 6-month, right? And then we want the lifetime. And then we want to understand what kind of investments we need to put into marketing in order to attract the customers and have a break-even point at some point. And then, at the end of the day, marketing becomes a bit of a bank, which is if you know what you can afford to acquire a customer for, and you can monetize that customer better than your competition, then it's just you spending more and more and more than your competition to get that sale. I think of Proactive, the acne group, which is it has one of the 4 or 5 chemicals that will treat acne as approved by the FDA. Like, it's not special, but what's special is the marketers behind it. Guthy Ranker tests a megaton of infomercials, and they pull in top-notch celebrities like, I don't know who's doing it these days, but like Avril Lavigne, that dude from Maroon 5, Justin Bieber, like they were all on the face of it. And those aren't inexpensive endorsements. They're not looking at the 20-year lifetime value of a customer. They're looking at like a 2-year or a 3-year. And they know that they can be upside down. They're willing to go upside down for 18 months on the acquisition of a customer because they know that their product gets compliance and reorders, namely because they have multiple steps to it. You got to do the step 1 wash, then the step 2, thing, and then the step 3 lotion. They're really intelligent about how they do that. So they know their math, but that math is limited in time to a couple years. Beyond that, it's another problem to solve. How do they continue to extend the lifetime value of the customer? Also potentially the customer doesn't have an enormous like calendar day experience with your organization. How long do you have acne for? I had it as a teenager, and then I kind of just like don't have it anymore. So I wouldn't need it. I wouldn't need Proactive. It'd be kind of foolish for Proactive to continue to advertise to me to try to extend my lifetime value, unless they got into, other things, I guess, that could be relevant, but that's too far of a deviation from their core offering and their brand. So it feels almost a bit of a fool's errand to overestimate and try to predict this long-term value. I think that there are probably more important short-term metrics, short-term even being in a few years, that are worth focusing on. But I'm open to hearing other thoughts.
Sure. Anyone would like to add to it?
Yeah, no, I mean, he hit the nail right in the head. I mean, I guess one of the cases of trying to understand lifetime value is that it can influence a lot of startup companies look at cost per acquisition compared to lifetime value, and they try to stay within certain ratios based off of the margins of their products. And so, that's the case for, hoping to understand that up front. And there's actually a company that I have talked with a lot called Retina AI, where they claim they can estimate lifetime value before a prospect even becomes a customer. But I think, to Casey's point, if you're a new kind of growing business, I mean, it's going to be tough to be very, well informed to know what that cost per acquisition target should be. And it's going to be so dependent on, different types of customer scenarios and different customer journeys. So I think it's more, taking a step back to understand what you're really trying to solve before you invest all that time and trying to calculate lifetime value until you have enough data to really make a really informed decision is kind of what I'd say.
Got it.
I'll be honest, Series A to moderately Series B, those numbers are alchemy. They're alchemy. And they're subject to 2020 magic, like we experienced, like the impact of like, oops, the economy just completely shifted. How's that LTV looking now? Right? And like, how do you integrate rapid shifts in the market, which is why we always are harping on the word scalable. But agility is second to that. So you get married to that number, I promise you will continue to be disappointed in it, when really what you should be looking at is your churn and your retention, right? Those are going to be early indicators, right? I think they have a higher level of importance. And of course, CAC, CPL, sure, monitor that. It shouldn't be wildly different one month to another. And if it is, then investigate it. But I think that it's a fool's errand in alchemy. It's just alchemy BS numbers. Don't get married to it, because you'll often be disappointed. And you could sometimes get so obsessed over that one singular metric that you miss outlier metrics that are right in front of you. And because you're chasing Casper, you're missing it, right? There could be a whole niche market right under your foot, but because you're obsessed with LTV, you're going to miss it.
So we're running late. Would you mind if we take last couple of questions, just last 2 questions? That's okay. Cool. So here is the one from David. Any tips on how to manage sensitive data while increasing data transparency within the organization?
What a great question. It's a great question. Who wants to go first?
Please go ahead.
All right, I'll go. All right, so here's the fun part. So guess what? Sales doesn't want you to know certain things as a marketer. Maybe they don't want you to know the close rate or their loss rate, because it can hurt. In the same way that maybe they wouldn't want to see your bounce rate went up like 20% or something like that, or down 20% or whatever. And I think that there are sensitivities that can be mostly handled internally if you have someone who, again, is like an administrative level person who can understand those permission-based things. Like, again, I'll use Salesforce because it's the simplest thing and I'm an admin at it, is that you can have roles and permissions where certain fields are visible just to C-suite. Like C-suite doesn't want to see all the nooks and crannies. They just want to see like explicit things. So when they come to the account level or the contact level, they want to see X, Y, Z. When they come to the report, they want it to be all plated up so that they can only see top level. Your VP of sales is going to want more granular information on like stage and status and like how often did it change and what's the percentage between, demo to call to closed won to closed lost and the DQ reasons, like all that explicitness. So there are ways internally that I think that you can basically build permissions and role sets around in your native CRM. But more importantly, I would say have a very frank and open conversation with the stakeholders and say, a lot of businesses tout seamless and transparent and highly visible, but at the end of the day, they also want to keep things protected and opaque so that they don't alarm people if there's a sudden shift in the market. And so I think you have to have that conversation before you even go anywhere near opening up data sets. And that's part of that pre-work that we talked a lot about in that masterclass on data silos, right? Is like doing the grunt work prior to the elegant solution for reporting is like, what do you want people to see and why? And then making sure that you have the folks who are in charge of those teams, whether they're the SVP, manager, senior director, I don't care if they're the intern, making sure that you're transparent with them and efficiently communicating the expectations for that data visibility.
Absolutely. So we'll take one last question.
Just if you don't mind, I just want to add one quick thing to that, which is ask for the data that you need and just don't let everyone have access to all the data. If people get into CRMs, limit their access. Just be intelligent. Know that there's substantial value in someone leaving your organization with an export of your CRM. Happens all the time. Yeah. Brandee, I'm sure you've seen stuff like that.
I was
happen,
going to say, if you do not have your audit trail downloaded at least one a week, or your export from, well, particularly for me from Salesforce, I don't know what you're doing, but it's a mistake because
mistake.
it's saved to a personal device that's not under WPA2, and it's certainly not under a VPN toggle, and that person is in an unprotected, highly congested metropolitan area that is now going to be extremely vulnerable. Oh,
Yep.
and you don't know because no one's at the helm for ops.
And
So,
like
first.
that's assuming that someone doesn't just say, I'm going to export it and send it to my friend. They asked for it.
Yeah,
Why not? What the hell?
And it's out in the wild, and so is all your PII, which is a
Totally.
violation of compliance. And guess what that means? Fines. So that data governance and hygiene, I can't state it enough. And making sure that you have someone competent in charge of your operations is fundamentally tied to questions like who should see what, right?
Totally.
Perfect. So Phil has dropped this meeting. He has to join another call, but we will just wrap this conversation with this last question. So, so the last question is, how is Hevo helping marketers and precisely marketing analysts? All right, so I think I can answer this question. So let me quickly answer this question by giving you a detailed understanding of our offering. So we all deal with data silos, and we know that integrating, the siloed data is a tedious and time consuming job. And that's where actually Hevo comes into picture. So Hevo is a no-code data pipeline platform that helps you automate your entire data integration process. Our platform supports over 100 pre-built integrations with a range of sources, including databases, data warehouses, SaaS applications, SDKs, and streaming services, and many more. So you can easily connect all your data sources together and unify your data in a centralized repository, which is typically a data warehouse. And it just takes a few minutes to set up data pipelines on Hevo. If you don't have any data warehouse setup, or not sure how to do that, then don't worry. Hevo will help you set up your fully managed warehouse on Google BigQuery. Also, we have recently launched a new product called Hevo Activate. It lets marketers connect the data warehouse data with any of your marketing, sales, or business applications, just like HubSpot or Salesforce you might be using at your organization. So with this tool, you will be able to gather all your customer data in one tool and find actionable insights on the go. So in a nutshell, Hevo will help you integrate all your data in one place, provide you a 360-degree view of your customer data, and help you speed up your analytics, reporting, or even the data decision-making process. So talking about numbers, Hevo is currently used by thousands of data professionals and marketing analysts from global data-driven companies, which are spread across almost 26 different countries now. If you are interested to try our product, then please check our website, www.hevodata.com. You can sign up for a free trial there or schedule a demo with our product expert and discuss your use case in detail. So I think that's about the Q&A round. I would like to thank Brandee, Cassie, and Phil for answering all the questions and sharing these valuable insights with all of us today. Also, I thank all the attendees for joining us today and making this session more informative by asking these questions. So we are getting some really valuable feedback on the masterclass, and we want to sincerely thank all of you for your kind words. If you haven't shared your feedback in, then please do so now. Just type in your feedback or comments in the chat window available on your screen, or you can even email us at events@hevodata.com. We are coming up with some really exciting events in the coming months. So if you are looking for more valuable content, then follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter for more regular updates. All right, so that's about the session. So take care and stay safe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.